Well, Russia has been messing around with Syria for a long time, and so has Iran. And, we've talked before about how the Russian mercenaries trained the Hamas guys in Syria in their bases to attack on October 7th, Putin's birthday, Israel, which started the whole thing. Now Syria is falling apart again. It's divided into a number of occupied areas. The Turks are involved, the Islamists are involved, the Yanks are in there, the Kurds are in there, the Russians and the Iranians, Hamas, Hezbollah. It's just, and Israel, of course, is sitting there watching it all. There is only one good development that's come out of that mess, and I feel so sorry for Syrians, is that Russia and Iran are now having to pull resources, military and other, from their other nonsense and wars to get into Syria to try and keep it in their hands and prop up al-Assad to do so. And so it's distracting them, it's weakening them, and their weakened situation is why the rebel forces, some of them led by Turkey, have gone in there to try and fix this. It's a mess.
And do you think actually it will have a tangible effect on the battlefields of Ukraine?
I think it already has. My understanding is that, the Russians are deploying jets to bomb some of these insurgents. They're very actively involved. And, in my latest Substack, I have a map of all the military installations in that country. I mean, everybody's got a fortress there. It's really a mess, and it's a powder keg. And so, yes, they're distracted, and I think it hurts their influence in the Middle East. And I think that it is sapping some of the military power that they have away from Ukraine. To the extent that it's going to turn the tide in Ukraine, no, but anything helps.
Writing in the Telegraph newspaper today, David Axe says Russia may want to sue for peace in Ukraine, or may just have to consider this if it loses its Tartus naval base in Syria, because it will be the only way to maintain its influence in the Mediterranean because of the war. If the war ends, it can then gain access to it via the Black Sea and the Bosphorus Strait. What do you think of that thought?
Well, I think it's all very important. I think they have a beachhead and have done for a long time that they've been building on in Syria, which is one of the problems. And they are now moving into Libya. And one of the things they want to do is they want to further weaponize migration into Europe and flood Africans into, and the Middle Eastern people into across the Med in boats. Yes, it's a listening post. It's very important for them to have it. But let's not forget that the Ukrainians have completely tied their dominance up in the Black Sea, which was much more important to them. And they've driven their navy into different ports because they cannot function. They cannot control the Black Sea. And also Turkey, which is kind of now opposed to Russia in Syria, controls entry to the Black Sea. So Turkey hasn't let Russian warships and aircraft carriers, or American and British ones for that matter, go into the Black Sea. So, yes, the Navy part of this whole thing is very interesting. And then there's also the developments in the Baltic.
And how do you think that Turkey is going to use its power and influence in this context? I mean, already it's resumed the conflict in the north of Syria against what it sees as its Kurdish enemies.
Well, Turkey wants a strong, stable, decent government in Syria because it's such a mess. The Kurds have been able to gain footholds and bug and create problems along the Turkish border, security problems. Don't also forget that Turkey now houses, I think, 3 or 4 million Syrian refugees from the last civil war in Syria that are just, it's a drain on their country and their economy. And the last thing they want is for Syria to fall apart even more. And they're going to have another 3 or 4 million Syrian refugees in their camps in their country.
So if Assad does fall, it's likely to have consequences be felt well beyond Syria's borders.
Very well beyond. It's going to be Turkey. It's going to spill over into Iraq, where there's some U.S. forces. And Israel is sitting there thinking, oh, my goodness, because one of the things that they're concerned about is also a spillover of troops into Golan Heights and so on, Lebanon. But they are very concerned that Hezbollah gets hold of al-Assad's chemical stockpile. stockpile of chemical weapons. And so, or Hezbollah does, or Iran does. And so they're very concerned about that. And if that happens, then all bets are off. Israel will just have to extend its warfare into Syria.
Mm-hmm. In Britain, a national crime agency operation has smashed a Russian global multi-billion-dollar money laundering organized operation. It spanned more than 30 countries, with money flowing back to Moscow to fund espionage and move cash for sanctioned members of the elite. 84 people arrested, said to be one of the biggest successes of its kind in decades. How much damage can this do to Russia?
Well, I think disrupting their web of illicit financial flows, which have financed the government, bypassed sanctions, and fueled Putin's empire and army and so on. Anything that can disrupt that is excellent. I think great work was done in Britain, and it's not surprising. And they're using crypto, they're using everything they can. Remember, the oligarchs don't have the power. They're actually just trustees for Putin, who actually owns all the money, I think. And they're not in the war. Their kids are not being drafted. They're living in Cannes and London and New York in fancy houses, and they're not really adversely affected at all by it. And their money, through these means, these laundering means, is able to get out and be kept safe from anything that might happen. So the more we can do that, to me, is almost as important as the shooting war. It's the financial war that has to be ongoing, intervening on technology transfers that help the war, intervening on arms supplies, intervening on the money. And the next thing that has to happen is the allies have to stop the ships taking oil to India and China, which go through the Baltic Seas and the Black Sea. They've got to do that.
Do you think that Western allies have been able to think laterally enough about this so far? When you talk about these measures that could be taken, has enough been done? Is it time for a mindset change and more investment in these areas?
I think that it's unwieldy, isn't it? I mean, it's an alliance. NATO is not unwieldy, but it only does the military piece. It should be all over the Baltic Sea for sure, but it doesn't make the decisions as to allocations and finances. It's a unanimous kind of situation. So very often it's enmeshed in gridlock, and there's not things that can be done. And remember, we have far-flung allies in this war, and so there's a lot of moving parts. And so I think that it should culminate and all come together in NATO, in the G7, and I think in the White House. And those three are going to be the drivers to what happens. It's very complicated.
You've been watching Frontline for Times Radio with me, Kate Chabot. If you'd like to be the first to get exclusive content, you can sign up for membership with the link below. You can also listen to Times Radio for the latest news or read it on thetimes.com. My thanks to our producer today, Louis Sykes, and to you for watching. Bye for now.